Hello and welcome. My name is Juliana Higgins, and I am the creator of Mirror Muse. In my first episode, I introduced myself and talked about Mirror Muse, about me a little bit, and then I got sidetracked and inspired to go deeper into my story, but it was a little too long as an intro, so this is the official bonus episode going into detail on how I got into fashion, what led me to it, the challenges I went through, and then how I decided to become a life coach. So here we go. The road to becoming a fashion designer was not very straightforward for me. When I was getting ready to graduate high school, I took the normal path every high schooler goes through with looking for colleges, asking themselves what they want to do with their lives, conferring with their parents. At least for me, that was a big part of my process. And I loved everything. I was good at art. I was good at science, like very blessed with those natural talents of having both the left brain and the right brain, and also very indecisive. Thank you, Libra Moon. But I gravitated towards fashion. A friend of mine was also going to be doing that, so it sounded fun, exciting. But I didn't realize at the time that my mother and her mother, my grandmother, who could sew, who loved fashion. My grandmother was a seamstress, and she worked really hard doing that. But my mother saw that even though she had an interest in fashion herself, wanted to go into that, seeing my grandmother like really working hard day in, day out, sun up to sundown, sewing, and just the manual labor that went into it. Like, she realized for herself, my mother, that she didn't want that life. And unknowingly or knowingly, with that experience, she, when I was making my decision, made that very clear to me that it was an unappealing job with tedious work and cutthroat, and, there's just no money in it. So she lovingly guided me towards being in a business major. But that was just pure soul sucking for me. Like, when I was studying business, it was just, I just felt like deeply drained of my creativity. I felt so out of alignment, and it spiraled me into a very deep and dark depression. And, being 18 at the time, newly free after years of strict rules and upbringing that was out of love from my parents. Like, I deeply appreciate how they raised us, and there's no hard feelings at this point, but knowing where I came from, seeing now at least that I was just in such a need for freedom at that point in my life. Like, I rebelled, and on top of the depression, I turned to substances, drinking, other things, and it was it's really something that changed my life. I was in the darkest depths of my own despair. And so, having experienced that, getting to the point where I needed to take time off from school, I needed to take a medical leave of absence, connecting with some of my soul sisters who were going through the same thing at the same time, it also gave me like the baseline of my human existence. Like, traveling down into that deep, dark abyss was medicine for me now that I know what it is. It took a lot of therapy to start to get myself to be functioning. I didn't get out of bed for 2 weeks, and I really lost myself. So I tell you this because I know what it's like to suffer, and I know what it's like to be the person responsible for your own suffering. Not a lot of people talk about this. I mean, people are talking about it more, and that's kind of what has inspired me to talk about my story. But I know how deep it goes and how it can get when you are just so out of alignment. It leads to mental and physical health crises. And so it took that deep, dark depression to get me out of business school. I took a year off. I just followed my heart at that point. At that point, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I had grown up and loving and studying French. So I went to the local community college. At that point, we'd moved, and I studied French. And I didn't know if I wanted to be a French teacher, but I loved French, and just following that little nugget of inspiration, following my joy, led me to seeing and meeting people that brought me out of what I thought was possible for myself. I met artists. I met someone who was studying industrial design, and seeing their passion for it inspired me to go after what I was passionate about. I was always passionate about fashion. I still had that burning desire. So I went and I took some, extracurricular classes in fashion, and I loved it. I felt like I was finally able to speak the language that I had always wanted to speak. And so after my year of French, I enrolled in fashion school, and I studied art for the first year, did the whole art school thing, and really loved fashion. Actually, I'm going to pause because then I did an internship in France for college, for my fashion thing. And I was reading back through old journals, and I was like, fashion sucks. Why am I doing this? It's not about fashion. Trends come and go. Style is more important, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's really important to the story. Maybe it is, but I still was determined to bring this desire to be in fashion to life. And being in that route, I met more people. I met my best friends. I met my husband. I met so many people, and the work was really challenging, but I loved it. I was ready to show up. I was ready to work. I worked 2 jobs in that first year when I was interning. I worked for free. I got coffee. I cleaned up. I did everything. I loved it. And so I knew I was on the right path. My soul needed that expression. And then it got to a point where it wasn't fulfilling me anymore. And it was after then having spent 10 years in one career with one job, I finally went from working for free to having a decent salary. And I was like, wow, okay, but I don't want this. And the other thing was that people had identified fashion designer with my identity. But I wasn't identifying as that. Actually, even in fashion school, my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, would be like, you're going to be a famous fashion designer. And I'm like, oh, I don't want that. No, I'm no, please stop telling that to everybody. I am not a famous fashion designer now. And I don't know if I really want to be either. And it's what? No, that's crazy. You love fashion. But after 10 years, I was again finding myself asking myself, what's next? This doesn't feel like it's it. So what's next? And I had to go down a road that I didn't know how to go down by myself at that point. I saw one of my friends post on Instagram that they were starting to practice coaching, and they were looking for practice clients. And I was like, what do I have to lose? I've done years of therapy. I read all the self-help books. I like logically know what's wrong with me or what's making me, like, I know what's happened in the past, my traumatic experiences that have put me this way, but I was still not able to take action on really changing my life. I remember one year for my birthday, birthdays were always tough. I hated the attention on me. Like, it just felt like so much pressure to perform and be this like happy birthday person and like celebrate and like, yay. And it's like, ugh, I wanted to be happy on my birthday, but it just wasn't happening. And so one year I was reading back my journals, because that's another thing about me. I have kept a journal since I was 7 years old. And I was reading these past 5 years, and it's like the same thing year after year. These same patterns coming up of me being unhappy, in and out of different relationships, the same patterns showing up. And it's like, what is it going to take for me to be happy? And like, not just happy, but like, how do I get past these situations that keep coming up for me? So seeing that distant friend of mine post about coaching, and I'm like, okay, well, like, I've done therapy. So what do I have to lose? Like, what do I have to lose? And I remember messaging her and being so excited, and she was so supportive, and just like, I was just blown away with like how excited she was to work with me. Like, a therapist does not show up to your engagement that excited. So I was like, wow. And she's being super supportive, and like, this is crazy. But it's still, wouldn't hear from her for a few days. And I'm like, oh my God, did I do something wrong? Like, ooh, this is so vulnerable. Like, why did I put myself out there like this? And, I remember her saying like, I'm not ready yet, but I will be in a few weeks. And I'm like, I am ready when you are. And, I later came to find out that was very scary for her. But, I was just ready at that point. And after a year of coaching, honestly, after our first few sessions, but like really after a month, I saw huge progress. After 2 months, I saw huge progress. 3 months, I was like, wow, yes, sign me up for more. And at that time, I was doing 3 months at a time with her. And, so I did 3-month sessions. And after 9 months, I felt reborn. Like, I had blasted through boundary issues, limiting beliefs, abandonment issues, trust issues, like so many things that I had been carrying around for decades, and probably carrying around throughout time. And so I was like, yes, coaching is my jam. This is awesome. I want everyone to have this kind of progress and transformation. And then I was like, wait a minute, looking for a new career, really passionate about coaching. Like, why not? So I somehow found the right coaching program for me, becoming a spiritual coaching through the Life Purpose Institute. And I did that while I was working full time, and it was very intense, but I got such great training from that. And then the stars aligned. My prayers were answered in a way, and I was let go from my fashion job. And it really was the push. I was ready at that point to take this leap and dive in and finally get to express myself like this and talk about coaching. And so here we are. I started this life coaching business and candle business. That's a whole nother story itself, which I'm going to talk about in one of the next episodes in this little mini series. So stay tuned. It's a good one. They're all good ones, by the way. So yeah, that's my story. Shout out to Nurse Nell, who helped me get onto this path. Like, I'm forever grateful. And so if you're looking for a trauma-informed life coach, she's your girl. She's awesome. And like, I just cannot thank her enough for taking this journey before me and turning around and helping me along it. So reach out to her if you're interested in her vibe and her coaching methods. I'll link everything below. So yeah, that's my story.